So you want a tank, but what does that mean? Well, primarily you're there to mitigate damage. You're the meat shield. You need to position enemies, and all of this will depend on your threat, your gear, your cooldowns, and your rotation. Enemies respond to threat. In a basic sense, this is simply damage. So as you damage enemies, you generate threat. If you out-threat the DPS, you will hold the aggro or the attention of the enemy, and that is your goal. Now, proper etiquette is DPS will attack your target, but not all DPS do this, and a lot of times they will be attacking something first, initiating a pull, which makes it harder for you to get aggro. So to reacquire aggro, taunt. Taunting is the best way to re-establish aggro once it's lost. Healer threat can be dangerous as it goes across all the enemies on the battlefield, and for you to acquire threat on all of them can be taxing if they're spread out. So you see here the healer nice and snug against the wall. He's going to be positioned there so that the enemies are grouped up nice and tight, and this will help the tank get aggro back. Some very challenging pulls can be trivialized simply by line of sighting. As you see here, we're going to line of sight behind this industrial machine, and this brings all the enemies to us nice and tight. AoE heals, AoE damage. Now tanking what would have been a difficult pull becomes very, very easy, and it becomes more a matter of using proper cooldowns due to you having so much threat. All the damage will be focused solely on you as a tank, primarily. One of the worst things you can do as a tank is just to simply pick an enemy and kill it till it's dead. A lot of times what you want to be doing is cycling through targets, trying to acquire threat on as many enemies as possible. One enemy hitting a DPS or a healer isn't a big deal as long as the majority of the pull is focused on you. And so typically what you want to be doing is cycling through targets as much as possible and trying to keep that aggro. And as you can see here with this pull, you see me jumping from ad to ad, essentially trying to acquire threat on as many enemies as possible, especially when they have low health pools, as they will die very quickly due to the DPS. Now, different tanks have different tool sets, and with the Vanguard in this, you'll see me using Harpoon, and using Harpoon to reposition this ad is generally a good idea. As much as possible, you want to be grouping up ads, making it easier for the DPS and yourself, for you to hold threat and for the DPS to burn them down. And here again, you get enemies with low health pools, so just give them a whack or two, move on to the next one. There's no point in being overly concerned on holding threat on these ads because they will typically die before they become an issue, and the initial hits that you do to them will be enough to hold them for the most part. Again, here we see Harpoon, just good repositioning, as much AoE as possible. You just want to be thinking, as a tank, mitigation, positioning, they go hand in hand. Now with this next pull, it probably would have been a better idea to line of sight, but the way I did it can illustrate how doing a pull that is somewhat challenging may result in the aggro not perfectly going to you as a tank. But as a tank, to get a good idea of how you're doing, you always want to be looking at the raid frames, and looking at the raid frames will help you determine how effective you're being in getting the overall threat of the group. With here, one or two group members taking a pounding, it's not horrible, but it could be better. But after you do get threat and it's on you, you want to make sure that you have cooldowns running, because you will get burnt out fairly quickly without them. And next here we see translocate, great way to deal with those bursty DPS to lower their threat, repositions you there, cool little ability for the Vanguard. And now when it comes to any ad or boss, if your threat exceeds their health pool, it will be impossible for your DPS to pull threat unless they use a taunt or the boss drops aggro, so keep that in mind. In a general sense, melee enemies are much easier to deal with, so you want to generally get threat on them, a few AoE abilities, and then try to drag those enemies to a ranged ad. Makes it much easier to deal with the overall group. Saber Reflect may very well be the single-handedly most powerful ability that a Juggernaut has. And you can see here this pool typically is very difficult to deal with. Spread out ads, fairly large health pools, hit hard, but with Saber Reflect you maintain threat on all those ads, doing decent damage and giving your group time to react. As you can see here, we clean this up with relative ease. And again, showcasing Saber Reflect. This is another very good example of just how powerful this ability is. Have so many ads spread out, but all of them being tanked effectively, being mitigated, and their threat being held. So make good use of Saber Reflect whenever you can. It's not an end-all be-all. You do need to still pay attention to aggro, seeing where it's going, but the vast majority of this pool is focused solely on the tank, which means that the healer will have a very easy time just focusing his heals on the tank, and the DPS can pretty much DPS with impunity. Pretty much trivializes this rather difficult pool. So paying attention as a tank, very important. You want to be kiting bosses that should be kited, typically bosses that have very damaging abilities. In this case, this boss will go into a very potent 360 attack if he's held still, focused down as a tank. So you want to be kiting him around as much as you can to mitigate this ability. I think with this pull we basically saw it once before he died. When you're dealing with a group that has a lot of ads, it can get fairly confusing as to how well you're doing holding threat, but ideally just looking at your raid frames is going to give you a good synopsis of how well you're doing. If you see that the raid frames, everyone's healthy, then you're doing a good job, you're holding threat, and that's primarily what you want to be doing. And then of course, as well, whenever you initiate a pull, sometimes ads will spawn or aggro in a different area. In this case, they aggroed off to the side. So making sure that you're aware, looking at the red dots on your map, and just locating where damage is coming from is a great way to be a savvy tank. Now in a general sense, you just want to give a good few whacks on the big enemies, get their initial attention, and then go to killing the weaker enemies and holding threat on those. DPS should, by default, be killing the weak enemies, but a lot of times they are not good DPS, and they will just bang on the enemy with the biggest health pool, which is not good. But as a tank, just use your taunts to mitigate this a bit, but don't sweat it for the most part. A few of the bigger ads will not deal as much damage as having a swarm of little ads attacking everyone. So if you have to lose threat on one of the bigger enemies, it's not the end of the world. Just try your best, but try to save your taunts for that. And just keep in mind, like I said earlier, that good DPS will always be focusing the weaker ads first and working their way up to the more elite ones. And as a tank, you need to think in terms of threat. So many tanks get lost in thinking of tanking as DPSing and just hitting an ad and just trying to kill an individual ad. You're trying to think in terms of aggro. How much aggro do I have? Like in this case, I've got this sector of the room covered. Now I'm moving to this side. You see me moving all over the place, trying to get aggro on as many ads as I can. As I see I'm losing aggro, I try to taunt enemies, move to the next enemy. I know that taunting will guarantee get me the attention of that ad. And then from there, I just keep trying to cycle through. Enemies with extremely low health pools I typically don't worry about too much, as they will be dead soon, and I try to focus on the enemies that have higher health pools, as they will become a factor in the pool for much longer. And now dealing with conals, as we talked a little bit earlier on the onset of this chapter. Conals, kiting, these type of things are pretty much real basic to tanking. I mean, with HK here, you're just keeping the conal away from the group, and this seems real basic, real simple, but you'd be surprised how many tanks don't do this simple mechanic. And now moving on to other types of bosses or mini bosses here. This boss is extremely easy, pretty much has no mechanics outside of that one that was just interrupted. And if it's not interrupted, he tends to deal quite a bit of damage to yourself and to the rest of the raid, but as a tank, just like a DPS, you should be trying to interrupt key abilities. Typically as a tank, I'll be trying to interrupt abilities that hit very hard. Now here with Malgus, I am up against the wall as he has a lot of knockbacks. Sometimes it's just knowledge of the fight so that you can, accurately predict when to do this. In a general sense, try to always keep your back against a wall that you're unfamiliar with the boss. And yeah, that's pretty much it in tanking. Here you're going to see Malgus go flying to his doom. That was the end of this flashpoint. Thank you very much for watching.